Now, even though for me personally, I wouldn't really consider myself a dividend growth investor, and I also wouldn't consider myself a solely income focused investor. I would consider myself sort of a hybrid of the two, and throughout my portfolio, there's different names in here that are going to offer me more growth potential in the long term, as well as certain names in here that probably won't grow at all, but are going to pay me a boatload of cash flow along the way. But for those more income focused investors that aren't necessarily super concerned about growth or dividend growth focused investments, in this video, we're going to go over 10 different ETFs that are going to pay you a boatload of dividend income from day one. You're not going to have to wait 3, 5, 7, 10 years to start getting some massive cash flow. Every single one of these 10 ETFs are going to pay you a lot of cash flow right away and are going to potentially even help you reach new total monthly and new total yearly dividend goals, like you guys know I've been trying to reach also right here. Now, even though all these different ETFs for the most part are more income focused, these ETFs within this category are what I would personally consider high quality. So if you want to see which 10 different dividend or income focused ETFs I think can generate a ton of cash flow from day one, make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into the first one. Real quick, for those that haven't already, make sure to go to the first link in my description and grab my new dividend investing ebook, where I share exactly how I went from $0 invested to now earning over $6,000 on a monthly basis and over $1 million invested in the markets. Along with the ebook, you're also going to receive my custom dividend tracker, where you can track your dividend progress on an ongoing basis and reach your dividend investing goals. So make sure to grab yourself a copy of my dividend investing ebook and the new dividend tracker today. It's the first link in my description. So the first dividend or income focused investment that could potentially offer investors a lot more cash flow a lot faster than other investment options is ticker symbol GPIQ, the Goldman Sachs Nasdaq 100 Core Premium Income ETF. And even though this ETF actually has grown over time, it's up 23% plus on the max time frame. This ETF, at least so far since inception, because of the interesting strategy that they deploy, it has actually offered investors like myself over 9% yield trailing 12 month. Now, in this video, we're not really going to go through every single one of these ETFs in detail. I do talk about every single one of these ETFs throughout my channel though, so definitely subscribe and take a look at some of my older videos. But right off the bat, this is one of my favorites. If you want Nasdaq 100 exposure with the cover call overlay, of course, you're going to potentially see massive upside, which for the context of this video isn't as important, but you're going to see around 9 to 10% trailing 12-month dividend yield, at least is what we've seen so far. This one's in my portfolio. Definitely add ticker symbol GPIQ to your watch list. And speaking of Nasdaq 100 exposure, we can't make a video about massive yield, massive income from day one without including one of our favorites, JEPQ. You guys know it. You guys have heard me talk about it. One of my favorites across the board. Now, JEPQ, of course, has grown as far as ETF price over time, up around 15% in the 1 year, which is crazy considering JEPQ has also paid investors like myself around a 9 or 10% trailing 12-month dividend yield. Now, as far as quality goes, JEPQ is about up there with the top of them if you ask me. And like I said a minute ago, if you want Nasdaq exposure with the cover call overlay for maximum income potential, JEPQ is definitely one worth looking into. ETF number 3, this is also one of my favorites for high income generation potential. This ETF has been in my portfolio now for several months. I've been paid a boatload of distributions from it, and this ETF has firsthand helped me reach new dividend income goals throughout the last year, I promise you. I'm talking about SPYI, the NEO's S&P 500 high income ETF. This one, of course, offers S&P 500 exposure with the cover call overlay, and it's not only up around 6% in the max time frame, but SPYI has offered investors around 11 or 12% trailing 12-month dividend yield. And what I love about SPYI is that it pays more or less the same exact amount every single month. And yes, some months might be off a cent or two, but relatively speaking, this ETF is super consistent, at least it's been so far, and one of my favorites for massive cash flow generation from day one. Every single share of SPYI that I buy for around $50 or so per share, I'm expecting to get around 50 cents as far as dividends in my portfolio that following month. Speaking of another ETF, another fund by NEOS, SPYI and now QQQI, another NEOS ETF that offers a ton of high income potential, but only this one tracks the Nasdaq. And this ETF is up around 3.31% on the max time frame, but also offers investors around 14% yield because of course that Nasdaq exposure. Another NEOS ETF that pays more or less the same exact every single month. Definitely check out QQQI if you haven't already. Now we're getting into some of the higher yielding stuff. This is one of my other favorites. It has decayed a little bit over time, so keep that in mind. Over the last 4 or so years, it's down around 16%. But SVOL, the Simplified Volatility Premium ETF, shorts the volatility index as well as invests in some other things. And because of doing so, it's offered investors like myself around 16, 15, 17% trailing 12-month dividend yield historically. Now, as of recent, SVOL did drop their distribution rate, which I think has a lot to do with the fact that this ETF invests in treasuries, and of course, with rates being cut, treasuries are a little bit less frothy, but even still, this ETF basically trades more or less sideways and pays investors 14, 15, 16, 17% per year, and is sort of a stable fixture in the portfolio until, of course, there's massive volatility. Now again, not my favorite, not my least favorite, but SVOL is in my portfolio and definitely can help out if an investor out there is of course not necessarily worried about growth, but more so worried about cash flow and cash flow from day one. Now another one that shorts the volatility index, this is one of my newer holdings, ZIVB, the 1x short VIX midterm future strategy. This ETF, crazily enough, is up 32% in the max time frame. And what's even crazier is that ZIVB offers like a 25% yield to investors. For every single share of ZIVB that you own, it's around $19, $20 per share. It's paying out around 49 cents on a monthly basis, which is insane. Now, again, because of strategy involved with this one, as well as side note, to make sure you guys understand the strategy of any ETF and or even stock they're invested into, don't just buy something based off a yield or based off of a YouTuber, etc. Of course, do your own DD. But this one, although risky, I think as long as the volatility index stays somewhat stable, I think this one is going to see a bright future. I mean, it's done so far. A few more ETFs that are going to offer massive income potential right away ASAP. One of the income investors' favorites, QDTE, the Round Till Innovation 100 0 day till expiration covered call strategy ETF. This ETF is down around 6.36%, but does pay distributions weekly and has offered investors, I think, somewhere around 20% yield, at least historically. Now this one's going to pay a different amount depending on what happens on that week and what happens in the option market, if premiums are cheap, if they're expensive, etc., volatility and all that. But still, as far as income generation and as far as honestly a fun ETF to own because you get paid weekly, I think QDTE is an awesome one. I don't necessarily know if I have any of it in my portfolio as of right now, but the more I've been watching it since inception, I think I might add some more, maybe on some right days. Another weekly, same exact strategy, only this one tracks the S&P, is XDTE. This ETF is a little bit more favorable to some investors because they think it's going to be less volatile. I mean, it is up 1.22% on the max time frame as far as ETF price. Not to mention this ETF has also paid investors anywhere from 10% to 20% yield, trailing 12 months depending on where you bought into and depending on what weekly distributions you got. Now, some weeks, again, the distributions are going to be smaller than others, so I personally would never utilize something like this to live off of in the future because you just don't know how much you're going to get on a weekly basis. It has so much to do with the option premiums, with volatility, etc. But still, in the context of an ETF that's going to give you cash flow, in this case, every single week after you start buying it, this is an awesome one to look into, and is definitely on my watch list. We got two more. This one's SPYT, the Defiance S&P 500 Target Income ETF. This ETF is more or less traded sideways since inception, and this is since around March. And that's perfectly fine with me because this ETF has a target to pay investors around 20% distribution per year. And at least so far, it looks like they're doing so, or at least right on track to do so. Now, SPYT specifically is another ETF that's really helped me raise my overall income in my portfolio very quickly. I mean, it would take me so much S&P 500, so much SCHD, so much of whatever index fund you're talking about to get to the point to where I'm earning north of 30 cents per share per month. So if you're looking for something solid, at least so far, this is one definitely to add to your watch list. Now, last but not least, this is another one that could potentially add a ton more weekly income to your portfolio. And I'm talking right away here. This is YMAG, or the Yield Max Magnificent 7 Fund of Option Income ETF. Now, I recently backtested this one, and even though it is down around 7.39% in the max time frame, this ETF is in the green if you look at total return. It's offered investors big distributions since inception, and as of most recent, the last 4 distributions combined are north of 80 cents, which is massive. Now, say what you want when it comes to the Yield Max ETFs. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of most of them, although, like I said, some of these Yield Max ETFs that are a little bit more diversified because of their strategy could be possibly worthwhile to look into. But besides the point, this ETF probably can offer a potential massive amount of distributions to your portfolio with a lot less invested and a lot less time compared to other investments. So those are 10 different higher income focused ETFs that could potentially add a lot more total yearly dividend and total monthly dividend income to your portfolio with a lot less invested and a lot sooner. Now, out of all 10 that we went through, I want to hear from you guys down below. Which is your number one favorite and why? Drop the ticker symbol in my comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.